My name is Lean Tran Layton, and I'm a practicing immigration attorney in the United States. And I'm an immigrant myself. Throughout my life and career, I've had the privilege of meeting people from all over the world who have immigrated to the United States. And I've heard some amazing stories, and I want you to hear them too. These stories will make you feel a range of emotions, but most of all, I hope you will be left feeling inspired. Welcome to the Immigrant Voice. If you like what you've been hearing on this podcast, share it with others and leave us a comment or review wherever you're listening to it. Also, remember to subscribe so you can hear our upcoming episodes.
My next guest, I'm super excited to hear her story and for the listeners to hear her story because I think there will be a lot of inspiration that can be found in it. She's part of the legal community here in Utah, and I've seen her name here and there, but I never really got a chance to meet her in person. And we recently were on a Zoom panel together, and she told a little bit of her story, and I was like, I have to have her on as a guest because her story is pretty amazing. She is one of 2 DACA recipients in Utah who had petitioned the Utah Supreme Court to allow for undocumented immigrants to practice law here. And I'm just really excited to hear how that all came about. And it was successful, and the rule was enacted, or it was adopted on January 30th, 2020. So just earlier this year. So why don't you introduce who you are and what country you're from and how old you were when you came to the U.S.?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I look forward to this chat, and I really love what you're doing here. So my name is Heidi. I am originally from Oaxaca, Mexico. I came here when I was 4 years old in 92, and I lived in Chicago for 1 year with my family before moving to Utah.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember Mexico at all?
I actually do. I have not that much, but I have little memories here and there. Mm-hmm. Mostly, I think things that scared me, like, I apologize, you probably hear my son in the background. I remember giant rats that people would talk about that look like cats, fences, little events, little things here and there. But overall, I don't remember what it was like to live there.
Do you remember coming to the U.S. like for the first time?
I don't.
What about the first place that you lived? Like what you remember about that in the U.S.?
Yeah. So although I don't remember coming to the U.S., I do remember my first year here in the U.S. Because we moved to Chicago when we first got here, where a lot of my family had already resided for a long time. We had a few aunts and uncles that had lived there and their families, a lot of cousins. And so in my mind, for the longest time, I thought I had lived in Chicago for years because I had so many good memories of family get-togethers and little friends I had around the neighborhood. And so when I found out we had only lived there a year, I thought, wow, that must have been a really great year because I have so many memories from then. Mm-hmm. Living in Utah, not so much when I was little, but obviously I grew up here, so a lot more memories as I got older.
Mm-hmm. When did you when did you grasp that you were undocumented? Like, how old were you?
Oh, wow. I think it was in junior high. I don't remember how old I was exactly. I think I must have been 13 or 14. And I had already known, we were from Mexico, we were immigrants, but I don't think I really understood that we were undocumented or what that meant. Mm-hmm. There was a point in junior high when I grew up around a lot of refugees from Bosnia, and our friends were talking about green cards. Mm-hmm. And they were making fun of like, oh, do you have a green card? And I thought, I don't think so, and at that point I thought it must be this little green card that people have that at the time didn't feel like, oh, it doesn't give you any benefit. It sounds like just a card you carry around. And I don't think I realized that it was something that was at all important until I had a friend one time in front of all these friends had said, you don't even have a green card. And I was like, yeah, I do. Even though I didn't really understand what that meant. Mm-hmm. I fully grasped what it was to be undocumented until around junior high, when we had a lot of friends who were from the refugee community talking about getting their green cards and how excited they were. Someone had asked me, a friend at the time had asked, or had said in front of other people, Heidi doesn't even have a green card. And I, kind of gut reaction was like, yeah, I do. And she said, well, then prove it, like bring it tomorrow. And I think it was then that I thought, oh, this must be important. This must be something that people have and want to have. But it didn't really dawn on me until I probably turned 15 and friends were starting to look for jobs. We're starting to get these little gigs. And at that point, I talked to my parents and said, oh, well, I want to work this summer too. And that's when they were like, well, you can't, you don't have a work permit. You can't work. And I think that's when I'm like, oh, okay, that's the situation we're in. But I think my parents did a really good job of at that time saying, but it doesn't matter because you shouldn't be working right now. We just expect that you're in school and you're studying and you're learning. You don't need to be working right now. So that helped out quite a bit. Yeah.
So looking back between like 13 and 15, when you really started to grasp the concept, like, okay, I'm undocumented. But before that, and looking back now as an adult, do you remember maybe things that your parents might have said before? Like, little things that they would say. And then now you're like, oh, it all makes sense.
So I actually thought about that last night as I was prepping for this interview. If there was ever a time that my parents maybe talked about our situation or even their work situation, but they didn't. I think throughout my childhood, they did a really good job. And I don't know if it was for the better or the worse that they didn't really talk about it, but anytime they discussed work or, anything of the more serious conversations, they didn't do it around us. And so I can't remember there ever being a time that I understood that my parents were also undocumented. I had no idea.
So when you were, 15 years old and you grasped the concept of it, like what were you thinking? Like what kind of emotions were you going through?
Well, at first I was just a bit disappointed, thinking that, I can't work with my friends. And I saw them starting to get jobs and have money. And it kind of bummed me out that I couldn't be involved in that or have that same conversation piece when we talk about, what were you doing this summer? Or, everyone seemed to be making new friends, their new jobs. And I felt a little left out. But at the same time, I think, within a few months, it became very obvious that no one really liked working anyway. So them complaining, I think helped a lot because I could say, I'm not working. I'm just hanging out with friends all summer. And, we're going on trips and we're doing this and that with our families. It seemed to work out in a way that it didn't seem that I was really missing out on anything at the time. I don't think it was until college that I really felt like, oh, dang. I think later on is when I really felt the emotions that I was missing out on a lot more. And that it was a time that I wished I would have been in a legal status.
Right. So what was like the first, so you said it was college when you really started feeling like it was actually a big deal. So what was the first obstacle that you came to?
The very first obstacle I remember coming to when being undocumented, put me up against a wall was when I was applying for college. My parents had always discussed college like it was a given. I think since even junior high, you have to study. One day you're going to go to university, and then throughout high school. And as I got closer to being a senior, I think that we went to some kind of college fair and people came to talk to us about the process. At some point I was at the University of Utah attending a student fair for, I think it was for minority students. And some of the advisors came out and said, here's what you need to apply. Here are the requirements. If you're undocumented, talk to us after this and we can discuss the process for you guys to apply and what resources you have available to you. And up until that point, I didn't even think that the process would be different for us. I didn't know that they might need a social or that they might need to know whether or not you have a legal status or not. So I think at that point, I was like, oh, I guess I should probably talk to them. I didn't even know this was going to be a hurdle. But those advisors helped make that process pretty seamless. They met with us. They helped me write my application. They helped me write in applications for scholarships. And I got a full ride scholarship. And I just went straight into college. And I know that that's a very different story than other people who may have not had the same grades or the same stuff on their resume that made them stand out and would help them, get a scholarship that would pay. So that was really my first hurdle. But I think that wasn't even, every time I talk about hurdles, I still feel like I always had the best case scenario. And so, it was, there were barriers that constantly came up. But I can't pretend like I didn't have a ton of help along the way.
Yeah. Yeah. So it sounds like your parents, regardless of their status and your status, they always pushed you to go to school and do whatever it took to succeed, regardless of your status. So it sounds like you really took that and flew with it because you were like, well, I'm going to go to college and I'll figure out a way.
Yeah. Yeah. My dad especially it was just a matter of fact, when you go to college, well, when you're at the university, when you're a professional, I don't think they ever used words or made us feel like it wasn't going to happen for us. It just felt like that was the next step.
Yeah. So as far as their expectations for you, what were things that they would always tell you as a child?
That school was the most important thing. That was number one. They really instilled the idea that there was nothing else I could do but go to school. I think even when now that I'm older and I see other people who, don't go to college and go on to build businesses and do other stuff, I'm like, whoa, at that age, I would have not even thought that you had another choice but to go to college. Because of the way that they always talked about it. And so I think that my parents instilled the idea that school was number one. My dad would always say, there's lots of things that people can take away from you, but education's not one of them. You'll get to take that wherever you go.
Yeah, my parents would say the same thing.
I love that.
Yeah, it's so true.
Yeah, it is definitely true. And they would always tell us, we want you to have more opportunities than we had. And my dad, growing up in Mexico, did a lot of traveling. He was a professor in his younger years. And so he would always tell us stories of, oh, one day you'll get to travel all over the world with your friends. You might decide you want to go do your PhD in France. He just talked about it like the sky was the limit.
Yeah. What brought your parents to the U.S.?
So that one, I feel like I constantly have that talk with my mom. Like, why did you guys even come here? And it was really just some family issues that my mom was having. Let me rewind. So the reason we came here, I feel like, starts with my grandfather. My grandfather came to the U.S. As part of the Bracero program that they had, and was here for about a year, and then went back to Mexico, where he told his family, my grandma, my mom, my uncles, that the U.S. was just such a horrible place and they treated them really bad. And when he passed away, my uncles came to Chicago. They migrated, and my mother came here. She was around 15 or 16 years old. She stayed until her late 20s or her mid 20s. And then she went back to Mexico, where she met my dad. At the time, my dad had a great career. He was a professor. He told her that, all her kids should stay in Mexico, that they should all be born there in Mexico. And so my mom had all of us there, not knowing, had she just stayed in the U.S. and had us all here, we would have been U.S. citizens. And I feel like our life is a lot of these little choices that just didn't line up. And so she had us all in Mexico and left, decided to rejoin her family here in the U.S. And that's when she brought us. We we came as visitors. And that pretty much was what started, the cycle of us, being undocumented.
Yeah.
And I guess that we stayed here because, she definitely wanted to have a better life for us. She didn't have anyone in Mexico that was close family. She didn't have, a great job to support 3 kids in Mexico, and all of her family was here. Eventually, my father reunited with us, but the situation here was much better than it was in Mexico, and that's why we stayed.
I see. I'm going to fast forward to when you went to college, because DACA wasn't passed yet, right, when you first started college?
No. Yeah.
Okay. So before that had happened, what was your plan? Like, you would go to college, and then what would you do?
I don't think I ever planned that far ahead. I just thought I was going to go to college, and then we'll see what happens from there. I think in the back of my head, I thought, I think I had a serious boyfriend at the time, and I thought, we'll probably be married by then, and then I can, I'll figure it out. I'll probably adjust, and then we'll go from there. But I never really thought what would happen if I go through college and I'm still undocumented.
Yeah. So then DACA was obviously passed. And what was that like for you?
Yeah, DACA was actually passed after I had already started law school. I had finished, as I was finishing up college, I actually wanted to be an anchor and go into broadcast journalism. But I knew that I couldn't do that because I couldn't work. And the other career choice that I had and that I wanted to pursue was law. And I knew that, if I go to law school, at least I can continue to go to school, and it's not something I need a work permit for. And so I had someone from the S.J. Coiney College of Law helped me a lot to get a meeting with the Dean of Students to kind of discuss what my options were. And I met with them. They told me, you can go to school here if you get accepted, but you have to think about, 1, how you're going to pay for it, and 2, what you're going to do when you graduate and you can't work. But to me, it was, so I can come here, and that's at least another 3 years that I don't have to plan.
Right.
So I started law school while undocumented, and then DACA came out, I think a year into law school. And I was skeptical, but, secretly really excited, hoping that this was, the answer to my prayers. And at the very least, that it was the answer to how I could continue, how I could work and pay for the rest of law school.
For listeners who may not know what DACA is, it's an acronym. It stands for Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, and it's an immigration benefit that was implemented by President Obama. And what it is it essentially allows for people who were brought in as children, either undocumented, or let's say the child had initially entered with a visa and they overstayed and never left. It allows for that person to apply for a work permit and be protected from deportation, assuming that they meet certain qualifications. And one of them being that USCIS will look at a person's criminal history to see if they have one. And if they do, it could disqualify them from being able to receive DACA, depending on what kind of criminal history the person has. Had you always wanted to be an attorney, or was it more just like, it's another 3 years of school and then I'll try to figure things out?
Yeah, I had not always wanted to be an attorney. I knew my grandfather was an attorney in Mexico. I always thought that was really cool, and it sounded like a fun job. I love, all those types of legal TV shows. I loved watching that stuff on TV. I definitely thought it was fun. I didn't think that would be the thing I would love the most. I thought that, being a journalist, being on TV would be way cooler. But it was definitely something I thought about. And in college, I even made sure that I was in, on a pre-law track, because I've always thought that you shouldn't always just have one plan. You obviously always need a plan B in my head. And so my plan A was to be an anchor, and plan B was to be an attorney. So I went through this pre-law track. I did internships in law. I actually connected with a person who helped me at the law school because I had helped as a translator at some of the clinics that they offer.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it was always in the back of my mind as a career option, but it became the only option once I was graduating and I didn't really have any other choice.
Yeah. So DACA came out when you were in law school. And then when did you realize, okay, now I've got another thing where I can't actually practice law because even though you had DACA, the Utah bar rules didn't allow for somebody to practice law in your situation?
I didn't really think about what I was going to do after law school until I was pretty close to finishing. And I will also say that I didn't complete my law degree in 3 years because of obviously needing to work to pay off my school, not having access to loans. I had to ask the school to extend my law school 1 year. So in my 4th year, I started thinking, what am I going to do? And, in doing just some simple research, I saw that there was already some issues arising in Florida and in California where other undocumented people were trying to become attorneys. So I kind of watched that closely, thinking, if I'm not able to do it here, and I at the time was still trying to figure out, am I able to do it here in Utah with DACA? But at least I could see maybe California or Florida would pass something and I could be an attorney there. And as the time got closer, my good friend Stephanie Pitcher, who is now a representative and was also in my class, had come to me and said, what are you going to do? I mean, have you even thought about, talking to anyone and seeing if they can make a rule change? Because we had figured out that I couldn't take the Utah bar. And just in discussing with her, she helped me a lot and put together a group of people, state legislature, Luz Robles, some local attorneys, the state bar president at the time. And we got together and tried to figure out, what could we do? Is there a legislative change they could make that would allow me to sit for the bar? Do we go to the Supreme Court? And, at the time they took it to the state legislature and they said, no, don't even bring this up. You're going to cause all these problems to our other bills that have to do with undocumented immigrants, And then we decided, okay, let's just go straight to the Utah Supreme Court and see what they say. And at that time they said, well, we can consider it. Just send in a petition or, something more informal and we'll look at it. And so we put this together, they sent it in, and it was 2 years of follow-up, just waiting to see what they would say. It just seemed that they were sitting on it. And then towards the end of that second year, I got a message that, hey, there's somebody from BYU who's also in the same situation. And it looks like her boss, who's a Republican, has friends in the legislature who said that they would consider, bringing forth a bill or doing something. But we referred them to the Supreme Court, and they told her that there's someone who has already been working on it, and maybe you two can connect and try to see if there's anything you can do together. So we connected. Then we had Tony Kay from Ballard Spar reach out and say that they could represent us pro bono, and they did a formal petition. And that's when the process went a lot faster than I tried, which is great. It felt really nice having more support. And at the time, the climate in Utah had changed a lot. I think that they were more willing to consider this than they were, even 2 years ago, 3 years ago. And so we sent in the formal petition. Within a few months, they had oral arguments. And by January, they had changed the rules, which was amazing. Obviously, we were very excited. But then the pandemic hit.
I know.
And then we had to ask them if they would consider expanding the diploma privilege rule. They ended up doing so to allow other people, including us, to be able to take that avenue to pass the bar. And so at this time, I finished my hours and I'm just waiting to find out if I got my bar license or not.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. Because of the pandemic, there was no bar exam for 2020. And so in lieu of that, you had to do a certain number of hours, right? Of like basically kind of like a mentorship or internship of sorts.
Yes, we had to do 360 hours of legal work supervised by an attorney. And I feel like that would have sounded so great to my younger self, but having just had a baby in March and trying to do this with a newborn, trying to nurse, it was just a nightmare. I remember I had actually taken the California bar as a practice run, thinking that, I should probably at least take a bar and pass that. And I would have taken the bar over those diploma privilege hours any day.
So as far as the legal process of like the petitioning of the courts, how involved were you in like formulating the arguments?
I was not as involved as I had hoped I would be. The attorneys definitely gave us a lot of opportunity to be involved. They sent us the drafts and asked us to look over them if we had wanted any changes. But at the time, I was really busy with my job, and I wish I would have done more to be more involved. But I definitely was just in the place where I was reading, saying, yeah, that looks great. Thank you.
Yeah. So just to unpack it for the listeners a little bit, I was looking through some of the briefs that were drafted and submitted. And so the issue was whether or not the Utah Supreme Court could enact a state rule permitting undocumented immigrants to practice law in Utah, and whether they alone had the exclusive authority to do so, or if they had to, get it passed through legislation. And ultimately, the legislative and executive branches both agreed that the Utah Supreme Court did have the sole authority to make that rule. And also, it looks like the U.S. Supreme Court has also repeatedly recognized that the regulation of bar admissions is for the state Supreme Court to decide. So I think that was the main issue, right?
Yes, that was. And I know that in our discussion with the state legislature and discussing whether or not they should pass a law, there was a lot of pushback from attorneys in the state bar who said, we don't want the state legislature involved. The practice of law is completely up to the Utah Supreme Court. We don't want legislators involved. And so I feel like it was great to hear from the state legislature and for them to agree that, yes, this isn't really our realm. And whatever the Supreme Court decides, it's up to them.
Yeah. So it looks like there are 11 states in total, which includes Utah, that does allow for undocumented immigrants to practice law, as far as I know.
Yeah, there have been a lot ever. I remember that when I had first thought about whether or not I was able to practice, it had only been California and Florida. But between that and the time that we went to the Utah Supreme Court, there were so many other states that had something about it. And I remember thinking at the time, I was so crushed and I was so focused on the negative. I never even looked to see whether or not I could practice in any other state at the time. I have a lot of family in Chicago, and Illinois is one of the places that you could practice law. And I thought, wow, had I not been so razor focused on not being able to apply here, I probably would have taken the bar there and moved there.
Yeah. So it looks like there's California, Arizona, Florida, Illinois, Nebraska, New Jersey, New York, Oregon, Pennsylvania, and Wyoming. And then, of course, Utah. And I wonder with those states if essentially the same arguments were made.
I know that our attorneys had looked at some of the arguments made in some of the other states. Some of it was similar, but I do know in some of those states, it wasn't through their Supreme Court that when it was enacted. It was through their state legislature. Off the top of my head, I think California was one of them, or Florida. It was one of the two. But some places had different avenues that they took in order to get to the same place. I know our attorneys looked at that, but it wasn't that all of them had the exact same reasoning.
And it was great to see just all the support that you guys had gotten just in the legal community and other groups. And so it was really cool to see that.
Yeah, it felt really great. I actually went in thinking that we would get a lot of negative backlash, but I was pleasantly surprised with how many people supported it. I remember that I had a meeting with the dean, the interim dean of the law school at the time, and he was just so supportive and, told me there's, a bunch of professors here that agree with you and we want to help in whatever way we can. And I think that having, my school basically come in and say, we're here for you, just made such a huge difference.
Yeah, for sure. I'm sure that was it just makes things so much easier to cope with and deal with.
Yeah, exactly.
So what were you feeling throughout the whole process? I mean, I feel like that probably took a certain amount of courage to pursue this. And yeah, what were you feeling?
Well, when we initially sent it in, I feel like I thought that it wouldn't go well if anyone knew about it. So obviously, if it was able to be kept under the rug and low radar and the news didn't hear about it, I thought it would go fine. But I didn't think that there was a lot of positive sentiments towards the immigrant community, especially someone who's undocumented and wants to practice law. And so when they first started discussing, I asked, can we stay anonymous? I don't want my name to be out there. And as the news stories started coming up, that Utah was considering this, and I was actually pleasantly surprised that people had such positive comments. And I think that had a lot to do with just what was going on around the world, and nationally, a lot of discussions about DACA. People started understanding what DACA actually was and the requirements it took to be a DACA recipient. And I think that helped a lot. I wasn't ever worried about myself. I think I was more worried about my family. And although I do come from a mixed status family, my parents have since been able to adjust. Quite some time ago, I just wasn't able to adjust with them. And I just thought, that this is their lives too. And I don't want people, to say anything to them because of me. And so I think that was my only worry, was my family.
So the job that you have now, does it require you to be a licensed attorney?
No, I do compliance work. So we do financial crime investigations, and we don't. A lot of people on the team are attorneys, a lot of people on the floor are attorneys, but you don't need to be an attorney or licensed in order to do our job.
Do you feel like your law degree or legal education has helped you with your current job?
I do. I actually have people ask me that question all the time. Like, do you think that, it was worth it to go to law school? A lot of, I think, young people who want to go to law school and see that I'm not a practicing attorney ask me that. And I tell them, honestly, I feel like a law degree, if you don't want to be an attorney, is just a more expensive MBA. Like, having a JD shows that you're very committed, that you are used to doing some rigorous coursework, that you pay attention to details, that, there's a lot of skills that can be transferred to other jobs. And so I think that my degree definitely helps in the job I'm in now, and a lot of other positions, even if I didn't want to practice law.
Yeah. And I think that's important for any listeners too, that might be thinking, well, if I go to law school, do I have to be an attorney, or, are there other avenues that I can take? So that's good to know.
Yeah. I'm like, if you're thinking of law school, definitely look into it more. You decide whether or not that's something you really want to do through internships and other means. But I don't think it's a bad decision if you want to go into higher education. It's definitely a great degree to have.
Yeah. So when are you going to be officially licensed in Utah?
Great question. I am still waiting for the bar to finish reviewing my hours. I have no idea. And I know right now, with everything going on, I think it's taking a bit longer, and the process to get sworn in is a little different. And so I am really hoping for December. But at this point, I mean, I'd be happy with January. I don't even.
Yeah. I know. It's been such an interesting year.
Definitely.
I remember seeing the requirements. Well, I remember seeing that for this year, students didn't have to take the bar, and instead they would have to do hours. And I was like, that's interesting. And you had mentioned earlier about how you wished you could have just taken the test. It would have just made life easier.
I kept thinking, man, it's nice for law students, someone that, it's fresh out of law school, maybe doesn't have children, but it's definitely tougher when you have a full-time job and then you're trying to do hours on top of it. But I mean, obviously I'm very grateful having any opportunity to take the bar, but it was definitely a rough year.
Yeah. I feel like I can relate a lot to DACA recipients because I came here when I was a year old, and had my parents come in undocumented, or let's say we came in with a visa and overstayed and never left, I would have qualified to apply for DACA. And so I very much empathize, and in a lot of ways can understand
just feeling like I know, like I don't know anything much. Well, I shouldn't say I don't know anything, but I don't know what life is like in Vietnam. So that was where I was born. And the thought of like I could get deported one day would terrify me because I would be going back to a place where I'm not familiar with. I have some family there, but I'm not close to them. I don't know who they are. And so, yeah, it's just, I can only imagine just that feeling of just what's going to happen next. And obviously DACA has been in the news and, you know, is it going to get revoked? Is it not? And so like, what do you, when you see stuff like that, how does that make you feel?
So the answer is different prior to the Trump administration and after. I think that when DACA first came out, like many, I was very skeptical. And at the time, I was actually interning for the ACLU of Utah, and we were putting together free workshops to help people apply without having to pay lawyer fees.
Mm-hmm.
And I heard so much from attorneys who said, well, you know, this does sound great, but you're about to give them a ton of information about yourself. And you never know who the next administration is and if they're going to decide to use that in some negative way. And so just from the get-go, I feel like I was already put on alert that this could potentially be a really bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously that it wasn't permanent, that this was very every 2 years, you know, was not a long time. And to constantly live your life on a 2-year loop would be tough because a lot of us came in already knowing what it was like to be undocumented. I mean, I had already gone through college and part of law school undocumented. So, and I was fine.
Mm-hmm.
And so to think, well, I get this extra benefit of working and not being scared of, you know, the possibility of deportation, but I'm putting myself out there, you know, whereas I could just stay in the shadows and, you know, not be able to work, but maybe I can still figure it out. And I think that my feelings were always, you know, pretty safe and positive. And it wasn't until the Trump administration, until he won, honestly, that night, oh man, I just remember being so scared.
Yeah.
And God, I really just hate how emotional it makes me because I think for the first time, I actually felt that I could possibly be in danger.
Mm-hmm.
Prior to that, you know, I always tried my best. You know, you have to be this model, you know, model community member. You know, you have to be the best at everything. You have to, you know, obviously I tried my best to be involved in everything and be, you know, a leader in whatever I could. And it finally felt that all that wouldn't matter. You had this administration who was obviously very anti-immigrant, and they built a lot of their campaign around that rhetoric of being anti-immigrant. And so it was really scary.
Yeah.
And every time it felt like you would turn on the news, gosh, I hate that I can't even talk. Every time you would turn on the news, it felt like there was something new, that they were trying to attack DACA and that it's gonna, you know, use us as some kind of pawn this week. And it felt like a very personal attack. And it just made things really hard.
Yeah.
And honestly, and I know that was all that it was, because as soon, you know, as soon as, well, for some, as Biden became the president-elect, I feel like this weight was just lifted. And not because I think that, oh, now we're in a good spot, you know, DACA is still very temporary, but because I thought, oh, I don't have to be scared that he's going to one day decide to use our information against us, which was a very real fear for a lot of people.
Yeah. How do you feel like, because clearly it's just something that weighs on you and weighs on so many other DACA recipients, that this could go away at any point. But how do you feel like you Like, how do you feel like when you go down this like kind of dark place and you go down this rabbit hole of like just feeling really sad or depressed, how do you feel like you pull yourself out of it?
Prior to DACA, I think I was just lucky in that obviously we never had anything. DACA was the first thing that provided any form of relief. And so it was never in my mind. I think I had mentioned that I bet it's even harder for someone who grew up in the world of DACA and who then had to deal with it possibly being taken away, or maybe they were just barely about to apply and then this administration said no new applications. But for coming from a standpoint that we didn't have DACA at all, and you were just forced to try to find resources and try to find avenues to go into higher ed, to complete your degree, to, live your life day to day. I feel like I was just lucky that I came from no resources because any resources at that point or any help just made a huge difference.
Yeah.
After DACA and throughout law school, I definitely had two different ways of coping. The first was just constantly having a distraction. I always was doing something. I was volunteering, reading, talking with friends, hanging out with friends, traveling, basically anything that would keep my mind off of my situation or immigration was the way that I would do it. Obviously, that's a bit different for people right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that that's become something that's really difficult to cope with, especially during this pandemic. But I think that had I been in this situation now, I probably would be doing a lot of like gaming or, doing online games with friends, trying to Zoom with friends, just anything to keep my mind off of it. The other thing is that when I was in law school, and I had a lot of things to think about, like, how am I going to pay next semester? What am I going to do if I don't get my DACA accepted? And in that case, I always had my close friends, we could talk about these issues. And I had people that I volunteered with and became friends with who were always involved in community activism work and would constantly talk about these types of topics. And I honestly just stayed as far away from that as I could. And I tried to find friend groups that never talked about it, that were just so razor focused on their future in school and what their plan was for the future. People who were constantly talking about, well, when we graduate from law school, this is what I want to do, or have you looked at these? This is what I want to do next. Because I really felt like in just surrounding myself with people that were forward thinking, it made me almost forget what was going on and think about the future. And I know that for some that might not be helpful. Some people obviously do better to talk about their feelings and to be surrounded by people in similar situations. But I guess that's just up to the individual to, ask themselves, is it more helpful to constantly think about this, or is it healthier for me to just remove myself while I'm trying to get through this?
Yeah, I think that brings up a really good, you brought up a really good point in that who you surround yourself with is so important, because that can take you down the path of not such a great path, or it can actually help you and be like a guiding light as far as like where you can go and things that you can do.
Definitely. I completely agree.
Well, I have to say though that, in the time that we've been talking, that I feel like you still have this very like positive demeanor about yourself, and that, looking at all the things that you've done and pushed through, like you should be proud. Like you changed the game for undocumented immigrants to practice law in Utah. Like you helped be a part of that process. And that's something that you should be very, very proud of, for having the courage to do all of that stuff. And also having the courage to share your story, because I think that people who are listening to this, I think there are going to be a lot of people who can really relate to it, and that you're not alone in this. And so you've made a difference in people's lives, and for people that you don't even know yet, who are like, they might be in elementary school now. And I mean, hopefully something, by the time they're in college, something will have happened, like some dream act will be passed. But, there could be somebody who's in elementary school right now, and you might have just paved the path for them to be able to practice law when they're adults. So it's really, really cool.
Thank you. And I hope so. I really do hope that this affects more people. Obviously, I had, partly a very selfish motive for wanting to do it myself and wanting to practice law. But I know that one of the things that helped me just plow through this was that I personally knew people that wanted to be attorneys and were in the same situation. And I thought, either I go through this or they go through this, like someone's going to have to do this. And so I might as well get the process started, because we all know how the courts work, and it could be 5 years before this ever gets decided. And so I really do hope this affects more people, and that they're able to push for some kind of permanent change for DACA recipients.
Yeah. And I feel like for the most part, I mean, from stuff that I've seen in the media, that it seems like the majority of people nationwide actually support some sort of DREAM Act. And so hopefully that goes into Congress actually passing something.
I sure hope so. I definitely agree that it seems that more people now, are educated on what DACA is, and a lot more on both sides of the aisle think that it's a very good thing and think that they should pass something. And I hope that, this is the year, maybe next year, that Congress does something. But it definitely helps a lot when you see more people, being supportive, and at the very least looking up what DACA is. I think when it first came out, and even at the beginning of the Trump administration, it was hard to see how many people had such negative things to say, not knowing what it even meant to be a DACA recipient.
What would you say is your proudest accomplishment here?
Oh man. Honestly, I think to me, my proudest accomplishment was just getting through law school. Because it felt like there was so much stacked against me, in terms of figuring out how to pay for it, in trying to juggle, this schoolwork while working, while having, any type of mental anxiety and stress about what I was going to do next. And I know, for the most part, I feel like I was on autopilot. I can't remember a lot of it, but that to me was one of my proudest moments, was getting to graduate.
Yeah, that's definitely something you should be very, very proud of. I mean, law school itself is already stressful as it is, and then you just throw in all these other factors, and it just makes it 100 times more stressful. So my last question for you would be, what's something that you would say to somebody who's in your similar situation, and how they can still push forward?
The advice that I would give to someone in my situation is really 3 points. The first is always ask questions. You never know whether you have access to something or whether you can do something, considering our immigration status, but it's better to ask than to wonder. The things that honestly that crushed me the most, looking back, aren't even the things that someone said I couldn't do. It was the things that down the road I found out I could have done when I just asked the question. So constantly be asking questions. My second is to network and to expand your friend group. I know that it's so easy to just stick to the people you know and to not let anyone else in. But honestly, it makes such a difference to network with other people, get to know people who are doing the kind of work that you want to do one day, get to know your teachers, your mentors, and to confide in them. If you are uncomfortable asking questions one day to someone, it's nice to have a group of people that you can turn to and say, can you ask this for me? Like, I am too scared to do it. It makes a huge difference. And finally, my advice would be to not limit yourself, because, throughout your life, you're going to have people that'll do that for you. And so don't do it to yourself.
Yeah.
Just, always picture the end game and just do your thing. Like, don't let people throw you off track.
Yeah, I love that. I love that advice. I think it is so important to ask questions, because if you don't ask, you won't know. And you might just be very pleasantly surprised. And in that Zoom panel that we were on together, someone from the law school was on there, and she just talked about basically saying, like, just ask, talk to us, and we can help you figure out a way. If this is what you really want to do, we can help you figure out a way.
One thing I think of from that is that when I was in undergrad, I mean, you'd be amazed how creative other people are. You might not know how to get resources or might not know how to get access to something, but you would be amazed how much someone else could think there's a loophole. Like, let me think about this and I'll figure it out. And they're willing to go through and figure it out for you. So it's definitely, even if they don't know the answer, it's great to just put that in someone's head so that they can think, well, I might not know, but I think I know someone else who knows, or I know someone else who will, run this through the ground and find the answer for you.
Yeah. Yeah. So true. So true. I love it. And yes, I mean, I love your ambition. I love that you still figured it out somehow. You managed to be like, okay, well, this is my situation, but I'm going to figure it out and I'm going to succeed. So I love that. And I love that you have such a positive attitude about things when you could be a total victim and, woe is me and, oh, I can't do this, I can't do that. But I love that you've just pushed forward and have found success.
Thank you. I really hope that especially young people right now who are going through this and who maybe don't have DACA and don't know what they're going to do with their status, I really hope that they too can just find what they want to do and just push for it, because you just never know. I'm most amazed with people who don't have DACA and they're still doing the things they want to do.
Yeah.
Dang, here I am complaining, I have DACA. You don't even have that and you're still doing these amazing things. So
yeah,
I always think that's great.
Yeah. And I think sometimes the most amazing stories come out of people that have had all these hardships. And yeah, those are some of the most interesting and inspiring stories.
Yeah, definitely. That's why I love being on panels and hearing other people's stuff. I'm like, wow, that's great. You always get a good takeaway from other people who have had it even harder than you. So
yeah, when we want something bad enough, we will figure out a solution.
Definitely.
And that's all you can do is, okay, instead of focusing on the problem, well, what are some solutions? And sometimes you have to look hard for them. And sometimes it's going to take a lot of work for those solutions to come about. But yeah, don't give up. Just like you said, just keep pushing forward. We have a very short time on this earth, and I'm so happy for you. I can't wait to see what comes next for you.
Me too. I haven't quite figured it out, but I'm really excited to try to figure out what's up next.
Yeah. Well, like I said, you've paved the way for so many other undocumented immigrants who either dream of becoming an attorney now, or maybe they don't know that they're going to be an attorney, but will be. And yeah, thank you so much.
No, and thank you for having me and for doing this podcast. It's so important to have our voices heard and to hear from an array of people. I love what you're doing and look forward to listening in on all your episodes.
Thank you so much.